You would think magic would make things easier. In fact, it usually made things more complicated. It's been only a few months since Carter and Sadie Kane saved the world when they are called to do it again, as Apophis threatens to rise. Without hosting the gods directly, their powers have not been as strong as they were. Sadie cannot summon huge explosion spells, and Carter cannot summon the glowing golden avatar of Horus. They were ordinary magicians in training. Their quest is to find the three sections of the Book of Ra, as well as the sun god himself, and revive him. Can they do so in time? We begin our story with Carter and Sadie breaking into the Brooklyn Museum to steal an artifact. They're joined by trainees Jazz, a healer, and Walt, an amulet maker, and Khufu the baboon. The plan is to steal an artifact, figure out how to use it, and all within 5 days or the world will end. Jazz and Walt were the first trainees to arrive when they sent out the Jed amulet after New Year's. Their plan hits a snag when they notice a wedding is going on in the museum that night. They continue with the plan for now, though. They're sneaking through the Egyptian wing and pass a freight of an Egyptian griffin. They find the artifact, and it's a statue of the god Khnum standing over a smaller figure he's making on a potter's wheel. Carter goes on to explain how Khnum is only one of three aspects of god Ra. He rises in the morning as Capri, in the afternoon he's Ra, and as he sets, he becomes Khnum. Walt figures out the statue is hiding a scroll inside the smaller figure, but then Sadie sets off a trap. Ghostly white flames race around the room and the griffin peels itself off the wall and comes to life. When Walt tries to open a window, he unknowingly releases the 7 arrows of Sekhmet. They're plague spirits, and they begin wreaking havoc on the wedding. Carter is able to calm and control the griffin because they're sacred animals of Horus. He casts a Hatep spell and shows the griffin the Eye of Horus to get it to listen. Jazz pulls out her wand to cast the evil spirits into the duat and gives Sadie a wax figurine. She uses a statue of Sekhmet to banish the demons, but one whispers to Carter about how he'll never find Zaya, that she's in the place of the red sands. When her spell is complete, Jazz passes out, having given her all in the fight. Carter, Walt, and Sadie work to hook up the griffin to an Egyptian reed boat and fly out. Police are already on scene and magical fires burn on nearby homes. They arrive on the roof of Brooklyn House. Sadie's hand is still stuck to the papyrus scroll and is on fire, and Jazz is in a coma. As Jazz is escorted downstairs, Sadie examines the wax figure which resembles Carter. It's a healing shakti, meant to be used to heal diseases or expel curses. Bast comes and helps Sadie extinguish the flames, telling her that the scroll is only part of the Book of Ra. Then she goes to her room to sulk for the rest of the night, nervous about seeing her friends for her birthday tomorrow. That night she has a vision of the Hall of Ages in the First Nome in Cairo. Chief Lector Desjardins is speaking with a man named Vladimir. They speak about the emergence of a new age coming, and Vladimir claims that the real threat is the Canes. Desjardins tells Vladimir to guard a section of the scroll, gives him till the equinox, and dismisses him. Sadie is woken up by her uncle Amos, who has returned from Egypt. He greets her and wishes her a happy birthday. As she gets ready, she thinks about how on a usual morning she would be teaching sympathetic magic. Then she stows her magical supply kit in the duat before heading down for breakfast on the terrace. She stops in the great room to admire how lived-in the place looks since the trainees started showing up. As Sadie walks out onto the terrace, everyone is staring at her. She explains her vision and then everyone is briefed on the plan. Apophis threatens to rise on the spring equinox and the Canes are going to need to resurrect Ra. They theorize that Ra is somewhere in the duat and the Book of Ra contains a spell to revive him. If they succeed, it not only proves the Kane are on the side of order, but that Apophis is the real enemy they need to focus on. Sadie examines the section of the Book of Ra they found, finding it unreadable. Only when the book is complete can it be read. Bass and Amos chime in to tell the kids that the middle section is in the possession of the House of Life, and currently being guarded by Vladimir Menshikov, or Vlad the Inhaler, the third most powerful magician and an assassin. Bass says that she will go and inspect Apophis's prison to see how close he is to breaking free. And in the meantime, she will send a friend to look after Carter and Sadie. When Carter goes to get ready, Sadie stops him, reminding everyone it's her birthday and she deserves a day off. He's upset, but Amos agrees with Sadie. And with that, everyone is dismissed from breakfast. Before she leaves, Sadie visits Jazz in the infirmary. On the roof, she talks with Carter, who tells her about what the Baal, the evil spirit, said last night. Then she summons a portal, teleporting to Cleopatra's Needle and taking the train to her grandparents. It's there that she is greeted, but not by her Gran and Gramps. We switch to Carter, who recounts the dream he had last night, where Horus showed him the old pharaoh's bark of the sun god. Then he showed him a toned-down version of Apophis' prison, an expansive beach in the Duat made of millions of scarab beetles that are dying in great numbers as Apophis rises. The beetles represent the power of the sun holding back the serpent, but it's breaking free. We're breaking free! And not all the gods support the decision to reinstate Ra as ruler. They prefer Horus lead them instead. So later, after Sadie left, Carter was still on the roof feeding Freak the Griffin roasted turkeys. Then he heads off to teach Problem Solving 101 in the training room. Waiting there are his students for the day, Walt, Julian, Felix, and Alyssa. Julian is following the path of Horus, and Alyssa is following the path of Geb. Carter has them do some combat simulations with Shabdi warriors, tells Felix not to use penguins, he always wants to summon penguins, and has them go at it. Julian summons a Fist of Horus, Alyssa uses a Sapur or Miss spell, Felix uses a basketball, but when Walt tumbles, he blocks the coming blade with his bare hand and disintegrates the Shabdi. He has no idea how he did it. That's when a three-headed snake appears, demanding the scroll. He breathes fire at the magicians as they attack in unison, making quick work of the monster. Carter dismisses the class and goes to find Amos in the library. There, Amos assures Carter that Apophis only sent a warning. Carter notes how his uncle knows a lot about chaos magic since being possessed by Set, and how his magic changed from blue to red. Amos gives him a pep talk. He also mentions Vladimir and how he's in charge of the 18th gnome in Russia, and Carter asks if Vladimir is the third strongest magician and Desjardins is the first, then who is the second? Amos tells him not to worry about that. Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious. He goes to his room to try scrying for Zaya, with no luck, when Walt comes in. He quickly changes the image in the bowl to his grandparents since he was thinking about Sadie, and talks to Walt about the three-headed snake incident and the weird disintegration magic Walt used, but Walt doesn't understand it either. Their conversation is cut short by Khufu barking at the bowl, and then it bursts into flames. The boys realize something is wrong with Sadie and run off to the nearest portal, which would be in the Brooklyn Museum. At the same time, miles away, Sadie is faced with a strange scene. Her grandparents have been possessed by gods. Her grandmother was taken over by Nekbet, the vulture goddess, and her grandfather by Babi, the baboon god. They're part of that lot of gods who don't want Ra to come back. Sadie runs out the door, the gods quickly on her heels as she runs into her friends Liz and Emma, who she barely explains things to before telling them to run. The girls run into Anubis in a graveyard, and he speaks with Sadie, telling her to go to St. Petersburg for the next piece of the scroll. Then he gives her a Nejiri blade, the tool used for the opening of the mouth ceremony. He tells her to lose them in the underground and that he'll send her driver to get her. Then he kisses her and leaves. On the train, Sadie pulls her magician's kit out of the Duat and explains what's going on to Liz and Emma. Then they get off at Waterloo Station. As they prepare to face off against Bobby and Nekbet, Sadie ingests a potion and gives 2 Tiet amulets to her friends. Then she uses the potion's magic to cast a powerful Nada or Protect spell, bringing all the inanimate objects to life to attack Bobby and the baboons he summoned. When the girls make it out of the station, they spot a short, hairy man holding a sign for Kane. His name is Bess, the dwarf god, and he summons a magic limo to drive them all the way to Waterloo Bridge, as running water and gods do not mix. Get in, loser! Once there, Sadie has Liz and Emma help her cast a protection circle while Bess slips into his ugly outfit. Sadie's ready to make her last stand, but Bess comes out of the limo in a Speedo and scares the gods out of her parents with his ugliness. In the calm afterwards, Bess and Sadie drive off, but stop at the end of the bridge when they run into Carter and Walt. They have portaled over and used an amulet of the wind god's shoe to fly over to the bridge. Carter had put the riot police to sleep with a spell. And with that, Carter, Walt, Sadie, and Bess drive to the nearest artifact not being guarded by the 9th gnome. Bess drives them to the Crystal Palace Sphinxes to summon a portal. Walt gets out before they leave, giving Sadie a Shen amulet for her birthday. The Kanes arrive in St. Petersburg, dropped off in front of the St. Petersburg Sphinxes, the farthest northern ancient Egyptian artifacts. Then they head to the Hermitage Museum, one of the largest museums in the world. Bess drops the Kanes off, and they use the Duat to travel into the Egyptian wing of the museum. Then Carter casts a Lamoon spell to hide him and Sadie from sight, while they search for the entrance to the 14th gnome. Sadie finds a hidden door and uses a Wapes spell to open it. They wander into the Malachite room as Vlad is performing an execration spell to banish a demon to summon a major god. Carter thinks about sympathetic magic, how it's using magic on something small to affect something big, like voodoo dolls, and how execration spells were the most serious kinds of banishment.
Coincidence? I think not!
As Sadie uses a spell to search for magical traps, they overhear Menshikov talking to Set, who is contained in a malachite jar. He wants Set to tell him how to free Apophis and destroy Amos. The Kanes are successful in retrieving the second piece of the scroll when Set reveals their presence to Vladimir. Vladimir then summons a two-headed snake monster, a Jetsuhiro, to attack the Kanes. But Sadie uses a Hadi spell to blast the jar open, freeing Set, who incapacitates Menshikov but leaves a Jetsuhiro to chase the Kanes out of the Winter Palace. Carter is able to summon a Fist of Horus to blast open the locked doors to the Hermitage. Then the Kanes run outside, where Carter gets attacked by the Jetsuhiro before Sadie destroys it in a blind rage. Set appears and helps her carry a wounded Carter. Sadie makes a deal with him for the location of the third piece of the Book of Ra, Baharia, in exchange for his secret name. He also gives her the location of Zaya Rashid, Makan al-Ramal al-Hamra. They run into Bess and he takes him to the Egyptian bridge to portal to Egypt. It takes him to the Alexandria portal, which is 30 feet underwater, and Sadie promptly passes out. She has a vision of Brooklyn House. She sees Anubis and Walt outside the infirmary. Walt sought out Anubis for guidance, but Jazz's spirit is the one that called for Sadie, actually. Inside the infirmary, Sadie sees Jazz's Ren, another part of her soul. She tells her that a name is more than a name. It is someone's identity, which, based. Jazz also tells her that she'll need two things. One, she already knows, and the other is Walt. Then she sees a vision of the day Isis used Ra's secret name to heal him and force him into retirement. Ra leaves her with a warning and a promise that her husband's reign will be but a pale reflection of his throne of fire.
He said it! He said it!
And how Egypt and the world will fall into chaos one day, and Ra will not be there to help. Sadie then awakens in a hotel room and quickly works with Carter, the wax figure, and his secret name to heal him of the monster's venom. Bess mentions how the portals in Alexandria get twisted around, and how he pulled them out of the Mediterranean and got them into a Four Seasons hotel. Once Carter is all healed, everyone rests until the next morning. Bess tells them that Baharia is also called the Valley of the Golden Mummies because of the tombs full of Roman mummies. Sadie catches up Carter on what happened with Set, and they agree to split up.
I think we should split up.
Carter and Bess will go to find Zaya, while Sadie and Walt will go to find the last piece of the scroll. Sadie summons Walt through the Shen amulet, and the group split at dawn. Carter and Bess wind up traveling with some Bedouins who help them find Zaya's village. He's thinking about how his sister knows his secret name now, and how this ties into channeling the gods. It's about finding a bond between host and god, connections to draw in and use the power of the god.
Coincidence? I think not!
They leave the Bedouins behind and are given a pickup truck to drive the rest of the way. On the drive, Bess tells Carter how he was captured by the Russian Prince Alexander Menshikov and treated inhumanely until someone helped him escape. They arrive at dusk and find the village submerged beneath the Nile. Carter goes out to investigate and is attacked by water demons. Carter channels the power of Horus to part the river around the village, thus getting rid of the demons too. Together, Bess and Carter head down into the tomb of Zaya Rashid. They find her suspended in a water sarcophagus, buried with Ra's crook and flail. When Carter wakes her, she begins choking, and they rush her to the Nile, where the goddess Nephthys is able to leave her body finally. But Zaya still isn't breathing, so Carter begins doing mouth-to-mouth, but when Zaya awakens, she promptly punches him in the chest, which, understandable. As Carter is explaining things to her, Desjardins and Menshikov show up. They incapacitate Bess and are about to take Carter into custody when we switch over to Sadie and Walt. They rode camels through the desert, where Walt told Sadie how because he's a descendant of Akhenaten, his bloodline is cursed, just like his ancestor King Tutankhamun.
No, God!
When they arrive at the oasis, they meet Bast, who is speaking through an Egyptian mouth, like Saladin, to tell them that Apophis is counting on them waking Ra. It's part of his plan somehow. He wants to swallow the sun upon his own awakening. They leave once Bast delivers her messages and find the entrance to the tomb buried in the sand near a date farm. Sadie uses a Hadith spell that destabilizes the ground and collapses most of the undiscovered tomb. We can add destruction of cultural site to the list of Kane crimes. Sadie and Walt climb down into the tomb and meet the ghost of Mad Claude, and he explains how the Romans buried there wound up stuck as ghosts between the world of the living and the dead. They trick him into leading them deeper into the tunnels to lead them to the Book of Ra. They notice a statue of the god Ptah, god of craftsmen, and they notice the wasp scepter that he's holding that resembles the Netjiri blade. They try making an offering, but nothing happens. Then Mad Claude calls them out on their bluff, pointing out that Walt must be a disciple of Anubis because he is obviously dying. Walt confesses to Sadie that his curse causes people in his family to meet an early grave, and the more he uses magic, the faster it happens.
That's rough, buddy.
Claude interrupts them, growing tired of waiting, and threatens to bring the dead to them. Walt and Sadie talk some more and it gives her an idea. She uses sympathetic magic to move the boulders and get to the last piece of the scroll. With that, they flee, running into a horde of mummies that begin attacking them. But then, a horde of rats materializes and eats away at the remains till nothing is left. A farmer appears, possessed by the god Ptah. He offers them some words of advice and sends them through a portal to rescue Carter and Bess. Back with Carter, he's fighting Menshikov using the weapons of Ra. It gives him the power to summon a combat avatar for the first time in months. When Sadie and Walt portals appear, it helps them free Bess, who scares Menshikov and Desjardins back to the first gnome. Zaya passes out, and they catch a ride with the Bedouins to Cairo. Carter falls asleep and has a vision where Horus pressures him to take the throne for himself and rule with Horus as pharaoh.
Stop it. Get some help.
He also tells Carter how Menshikov did try to use one section of the Book of Ra, and that's what caused his scars. Ever since then, he's sworn revenge on Ra. Horus also shows Carter what Menshikov has planned, an army of demons and magicians to attack Brooklyn House. The magicians are some of the worst criminals of the house, like Sarah Jacoby, who caused the 2006 Boxing Day tsunami. Menshikov himself will go after the Kanes. When Vlad and his army are dismissed, Desjardins asks for the book of overcoming Apophis. Carter awakens at a hotel in Cairo. It's already afternoon of the equinox. The plan is to go into the Duat at sunset. Zaya, Sadie, Walt, and Bess are playing Senet, one of the oldest games in the world. At sunset, they make their way to the pyramids of Giza and climb to the top, where they open a portal for Sadie and Carter to go to the Duat, while Zaya and Walt go to the 21st gnome. In the Duat, Carter and Sadie find themselves on the shores of the River of Night, in their new ancient Egyptian-style clothing. Standing before the sun god's bark stand Nekbet and Babi. Carter uses Ra's crooked flail to make them swear loyalty to Ra, and then the Kanes begin their descent through the 12 houses of night. They make it to the 4th house before encountering a test. They must name Khnum's Ren, his true name. Sadie is successful at doing so, acquiring 1/3 of the spirit of Ra and sailing on through. Then they pass into the Lake of Fire. Sadie scrawls protective hieroglyphs on her and Carter before the boat is reborn in the liquid inferno. The boat docks at Sunny Acres, or the House of Rest, where they meet Bess. He warns them that Menshikov isn't far behind, and they rush into the senior citizen home for gods to find Ra. They go to the nurse's station where they encounter Tawaret, the hippo goddess, and an ex of Bess. They tell her they're there to awaken Ra, but Tawaret doesn't know where he is. Sunny Acres is huge and houses thousands of gods who have been forgotten. As they wander the halls, Sadie begins reading the second spell from the Book of Ra, which helps them lead them to him. Then they use the Netjiri blade to complete the spell and wake Ra up, but they point out that he's still old. But they're hopeful that completing the journey through the Houses of Night will make him strong again.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
Ra only babbles about liking zebras and weasels being sick. The Kanes race out of Sunny Acres only to discover that 3 hours have passed. They took too long looking for Ra, and now the 8th house is closed.
No, God!
Feeling defeated, they sail on through the other houses joined by Ra. His light brings renewed life to the Duat as they pass. Eventually, they land at Aru in the 7th house, or the House of Osiris. And of course, waiting for them are Osiris/Julius and their mother Ruby. When Carter goes to take a seat, his mother stops him, telling him that it's for another guest. Sadie hoped that it would be Anubis, but it wasn't.
She don't love herself.
They eat and rest until Khonsu, the moon god, shows up. They have the chance to gamble for more time to make it through the Houses of Night. They play a game of Senet, but one wrong move costs Bess his Ren, and he vanishes. The kids are able to win 3 hours in the end, just enough to get into the 8th house, but Bess is no longer with them. He sacrificed himself so they could complete their mission. They battle monsters in the House of Challenges and proceed through the 9th, 10th, and 11th houses in a blur. Then they arrive at Apophis' prison, where they find Vladimir Menshikov working on freeing the serpent.
You raggedy bitch.
Carter turns into a flesh and blood combat avatar. Sadie summons a giant kite. Menshikov implies that he wants to host Apophis himself, and how then fully awakening Ra will only help to free Apophis. Then Desjardins shows up, ready to fight Vlad. Sadie begins reading the last spell from the Book of Ra as Desjardins and Carter fight Vlad and his demons. When she finishes, she is left holding a golden scarab, a form of the god Capri. Menshikov makes a break for it, but is thwarted by Carter, who hits him with the shovel and stomps on him for good measure, before they attempt encasing him in a glass coffin. But he breaks out in an explosive display of power. Menshikov, now fully hosting Apophis, stalks towards Ra, and poor senile Ra is able to confuse Apophis just long enough for Desjardins to strike. After some back and forth, the chief lector pulls out a Shabdi of Apophis and begins an execration spell. He is successful in getting rid of the snake, and as the beach implodes, Carter Sadie hauls Desjardins to the boat of Ra. But Desjardins is dying, having used the last of his life force to help fight Apophis. He gives them the leopard skin cloak, the symbol of the chief lector, and dissolves into a swirl of hieroglyphs. With that, Sadie tries to give Ra the golden scarab, which he promptly swallows and nothing happens. They sail on out of the Duat and into New York Harbor. From there, the Kanes fly the boat to Brooklyn House. At Brooklyn House, the trainees are barely fending off Menshikov's forces. Freak the Griffin is busy attacking the flying Udai, which stop attacking the moment Ra appears. Ra gives Zaya the golden scarab beetle, and Walt and Zaya stay with Ra on the sunboat while the Kanes dive into the fight inside Brooklyn House. Before the enemy can retreat, Sadie summons the Wings of Isis to tell them truth. The raising of Ra, Menshikov's betrayal, how Desjardins died fighting by their side, and most importantly, how the gods and the House of Life must work together if they hope to stop Apophis. Then Ra begins rising into the heavens. Zaya and Walt jump off the boat as Bass escorts the sun god to the other gods. In the quiet afterwards, the trainees and Amos explain how they were barely able to hold back their attackers until Ra rose and brought new energy, new life. His rebirth even brought Jazz out of her coma. Carter wonders what claim Sarah Jacoby meant when she yelled at Amos. Sadie explains that Amos is the second strongest magician after Desjardins, and now that Mitchell is gone, Amos is now chief lector of the House of Life. Later that day, Zaya and Amos leave for the first knoll. Near sunset, Bass shows up telling the Kanes that the gods wish to speak with them. She takes them through a door conjured by Anubis into the throne room of the gods. The gods are respectful, but not happy about Ra. Bass then takes them to Sunny Acres, where Bess is in a catatonic state since losing his Ren. Tawaret blames Bass for using Bess, knowing that he liked her. Carter and Sadie promise to help heal Bess, and then they depart the Duat. In the mortal world back at Brooklyn House, Walt goes to speak with Sadie in her room. He tells her to record their quest and tell the truth like they did last time. He leaves and Carter comes in, giving Sadie his birthday gift to her. It's their mother's college textbook. She hugs him and tells him how she loves him. And with that, the story ends as Sadie reminds the readers to help join in the fight against Apophis. So Ra is back, but he is not in any condition to rule. Bess sacrificed his life to help them. Did Carter and Sadie do the right thing? Sometimes we can only know we made the right decision long after we've already made it. I did love the scene where Sadie blasted that monster after it bit her brother. The sibling love there was very palpable. Also later, Carter was fretting over sending Sadie off on her own. Even if she was with Walt, he felt responsible as an older brother. They've grown close over the last few months, which makes sense because they're basically the only family they've had since losing their father, and Amos had to leave for Egypt for a while. Also, the coming-of-age moment for Sadie when her friends tell her how much she has grown, growing up and growing apart, doesn't have to be the end. I enjoy seeing the way gods and their former hosts will hold remnants of each other's personality in themselves, like Bobby getting into rugby after possessing Grandpa Faust, or Amos using more storm magic since hosting Set. Sadie's love life should not be with too much older guys. Walt could have easily been 14, and it wouldn't have changed much for the story, except making his impending death more cruel. I'd rather follow Bess and Towaret's love life. It's more interesting and not as weird. Ptah was my favorite god. There was a period in high school where I felt like I was cursed for speaking things into existence, and I related to him in that aspect. I felt I often brought my own bad luck upon myself. While the previous book was a reflection of grief, this book is an analogy for moving on from change, adapting and accepting that things are not what they were, but we have the power to make these situations our own. And that's all I have to say for now. Please leave a like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Bye!
Bye!